everybody, today we're going to take a look at another state for 2024 and see which way it might be trending. Spoiler, the lucky state today is going to be Illinois. I know some people have requested this to me in the comments, so today we're going to finally get into it. So first, this map has the presidential changes between 2016 and 2020. And every time we look at this, we can see there's a lot of blue on this map. If we look at Illinois, there's also a lot of blue. However, we do see some red on here. Notably, there's a bunch of it in the northeast part of the state where Chicago is. So let's dive into some of the political history for the Prairie State, and we can start off with some of the background. And the first thing to mention for background information is the state has gone from 20 electoral votes down to 19 since the last presidential election. The state, like with some others in the industrial Midwest, has lost population over the past couple of decades. But in the last election, this was easily a safe blue state. We can see Biden won the state by about 17 points, and that's remarkably almost exactly the margin it was in the two prior elections. Now in 16, there were a lot more third-party votes, so both sides had some vote taken away. But back in 12, the percentages were almost identical to what they were in 2020. And that was when Barack Obama was running for his second term. And of course, this is Obama's home state. So the Democrats here have won by at least 10-point margins going all the way back to 1988. And that one, it was not only under 10 points, but it was won by the Republican George H.W. Bush. And that capped off several elections in a row where the state supported the Republican for president. So times have changed. It solidified itself as a blue state. So let's look a little closer at the 2020 election. So again, we've got Biden with about 57.5. We've got Trump with about 40.5. It's more than a 1 million vote advantage for Biden. If we look at the third party support, there's a lot less than there was in 2016. Joe Jorgensen was just over 1%. Now we'll look at some of the shifts in just a minute, but if you take a look at the county map here, you can familiarize yourself with some of the notable cities. Of course, Chicago is by far the most dominant city, but this map also lists Rockford, Peoria, and the state capital of Springfield. Now let's look at these counties and sort by the total number of votes cast. So of course, Cook County, where Chicago is, that has a ton of the population. Biden won that by a gigantic 50-point margin. But then we've got a lot of suburban Chicago counties, and Biden also did pretty well in those, winning most of those by double digits. The county with the most votes that supported Trump was McHenry, and it was only by a narrow 3-point margin. Madison supported Trump by double digits, and then in a lot of states we've taken a look at, usually the medium-sized counties did lean toward Trump. However, in Illinois, some of the medium-sized counties you can see here, they supported Biden, sometimes even by double-digit margins. However, once you get down to the more sparsely populated rural counties, then we see the familiar pattern where Trump won almost all of them by gigantic margins, many times winning by more than 50 or 60 points. Now let's take a look at the shifts in some of these counties, and for that we're going to get on Ballotpedia. And this time the shading does not indicate the margins. That just shows you how many times they supported the Democrat or the Republican for president in the past 3 presidential elections. So let's start where more than 40% of the population lives. That's Cook County. Now one thing to keep in mind is this county has generally lost some population. But if we look at these margins, we can see that in 2020 it's voting almost exactly in line with where it was in 2012. In fact, the support for the Democrat has hovered right around 74 in the past 3 elections. Now in 2016, with that increase in third-party support, that's where Trump went down almost 4%. But in the last election, with less third-party vote, Biden only went up 0.3%. Meanwhile, Trump went up more than 3, but he's still slightly under where Mitt Romney was back in 12. So technically, this extremely blue county did shift toward Trump. Now, given this is a major city with a significant metropolitan area, we've got to take a look at the surrounding counties, also known as the collar counties. So to the south, in Will County, we could see Biden did better than Obama did in 12, while Trump did worse than Romney. But between 16 and 20, the common theme is with less third-party support, Biden clearly gained more than Trump. He was up more than 3 points, while Trump only went up more than 1. North and west, we've got DuPage County. This was actually very competitive back in 12. Obama only carried it by 1 point. Then in 16, Biden went up by more than 3 points, while Trump sank a massive 10 points. Then in the last election, Trump goes up by a little over 1, while Biden surges by almost 5. There's a similar theme here if you take a look at more suburbs in Kane County. Back in 12, it's very competitive. Then in 16, it lurches hard toward the left. Then in 20, Trump is stagnant while Biden goes up. And north in Lake County, it's a similar story. It was not as competitive in 2012, but once Trump got on the ballot, his support went way down, while the support for the Democrats went way up. Now, the most popular populous county that Trump was able to win is right next door in McHenry County. However, the margin here is much more narrow than it was 8 years prior. Romney almost won it by 9 points, but last time Trump only won it by 2.5. Now, obviously, we can't go over every county, but another part of the state to take a look at is going to be in the Northwest. These counties have a lot more in common with what we've seen in other industrial Rust Belt states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, or Wisconsin. All these ones that are lighter red voted for Obama back in 12, but then they dramatically flipped and supported Trump both times by wide margins. Now, many of these don't have much population, but the most populous is going to be Rock Island County. That one you could see back in 12, Obama won it by 22 points, but then in the next election it was down to just 8. But then in the last election, Trump was basically flat, while Biden went up 4.5. That part of the state is also part of the Quad Cities area with neighboring Iowa. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the state does have some medium-sized counties that do vote blue. That's usually going to be because they're a little bit more urbanized or have a large college town. One other spot to take a look at is going to be downstate on the Illinois side of the St. Louis suburbs. So for that, we could go down to Madison County, and this is the most populous county that Trump won by double digits. And you could see this was much more competitive back in 12. Romney only won it by 1.5. Then in 16, Trump won it by more than 15. But last time the margin narrowed up a couple of points. South of there in St. Clair County, Obama won it by 14. Then Hillary did significantly worse in 16. But in 2020, Trump was stagnant while Biden went up by more than 3 points. So outside of that, you could take a look at most of these other counties, and many of them supported Trump by overwhelming margins. Again, most of these counties have a lot more in common with the red counties we've seen in the rest of the Rust Belt. Trump easily gets into the mid-70s, even into the mid-80s in some of these counties. So another way to take a look at the data is going to be on this map here. This will give you an extremely detailed precinct level view of the vote in 2020. And at a glance, the northeast part of the state around Chicago is extremely blue, and then outside of a few scattered medium-sized cities I mentioned, the bulk of the rest of the state is overwhelmingly red. But another thing we can do is click right here, and this will transform the map and show you the shifts between 16 and 20. If we do that, then we get a mix of red and blue, so different counties moving in different directions. But if we go to the Chicago area, then we get a very interesting picture. Then we see in Chicago itself, there's actually a lot of red scattered all over. And this backs up the shifts we saw in Cook County, which actually did move toward Trump. Now, different racial demographics could be a dominant theme here, so there's some trade-offs here for both sides. Once you even everything out, we already saw the margin in 2020 was almost identical to what it was in 2016. Now, if you want another way to take a look at these shifts, we could get on this map here that has the red and the blue arrows. Blue arrows move toward Biden, red arrows move toward Trump. The bigger the arrow, the bigger the shift. Now, you could also click on any one of these arrows to get a more detailed breakdown. So let's take a look at a county we haven't looked at yet. Let's see where the state capital is in Sangamon County. We could see between 16 and 20, both Biden and Trump gained raw vote. But Biden gained a lot more. He was at 8,000, while Trump was at 3,500. A big factor here, again, is going to be the reduction in third-party vote. It went down more than 2/3, a raw 5.4% reduction, all the way down to just 2.2. Throughout all those shifts, Biden went up 5.1, while Trump went up just 0.3. So that results in a decent shift toward Biden. But in addition to the shifts overall, as I touched on, shifts among specific demographic groups might be a big factor. So if you look at the national 2020 exit polling, you can see where Biden and Trump had their best gains. Biden did his best with moderates, independents/other income 50 to 100,000, white men and Catholics. Trump did his best with income over 100,000, Asians, Republicans, black men, and age 30 to 44. But if you want some specific Illinois exit polling, we've got it right here. This will give you a better idea of the strengths and weaknesses of each side. Biden here won both men and women as well as every age group. Even every education group, Biden had a clear advantage. The last thing I'll mention, if you were to scroll down further, is Biden won independents by 8 points. So in addition to the demographic breakdown, the turnout or the voter enthusiasm in general could also be a major factor. So this map here shows you the turnout in the last 3 federal elections. In the 2018 blue wave midterm, the turnout here was over 50%. Then in 2020, like with most states, the turnout shot way up, but the top number shows you the turnout in the most recent election in 2022. There it sank back down to 45%. So I would expect turnout to be somewhere between 2020 and 2022. But again, that doesn't tell you which side is going to be more excited to turn out. So recently, Republicans have had no success in this state. Here are the results from the last governor's election. It was a 12.5-point win for Pritzker. Now that is clearly less than the margin for president at about 17. So the last thing we're going to do is take a look at how accurate the polling was back in 2020. There's not a ton of polls here, given this is not remotely a competitive state, but in the aggregate, it was actually pretty good here. It had Biden up about 17. So with all that said, which way is Illinois going to trend? So it's a pretty blue state overall. The simplest way I try to anticipate shifts as we get closer closer to the election is to gauge the popularity of the party in power. So given that it's pretty weak, I think it's easy to say that almost any state could move slightly toward the right. It's not totally clear, but the state has not moved that much over the past several elections. As we saw, there's a lot of different parts of the state that have some intriguing trends. Given it's so blue, it doesn't get the kind of attention that the nearby Rust Belt states have gotten. But I can't go on forever about it. We'll see what happens. Hopefully that explains enough about the recent political history of Illinois. So let me know in the comments, which way do you think Illinois is going to trend? Could it get bluer and hit 20 points for the Democrat? Or is it bound to start getting redder? What about the different regions and the urban and rural divide? Let me know what you're expecting down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.